Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And tonight we're going to give our hot take review of the game we just finished playing, Soul, Last Days of a Star. But before we do have some poll results to discuss tonight. Every week on social media, I ask a poll question. This week I asked on Twitter and on our Facebook group. The poll question I asked this week was, how many times on average do you think you get most games played within a year after you purchase them? Option 1 was 0 to 1. On Twitter, that was 18.1%, and on Facebook, it was 17%. Option 2 was 2 to 5, and on Twitter, that was 64.1%. On Facebook, 70%. Option 3 was 6 to 15, 15.2% on Twitter and 12% on Facebook. And option 4 was 16 plus, a lowly 2.5% on Twitter and 1% on Facebook said they had played games 16 plus times on average in the first year since they purchased it. How did you guys answer this question?
I sadly answered this one in the 2 to 5 times category.
And you overestimated, didn't you?
I probably did. It's so sad. So this is within the first year of having the game. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sadly, I was going back looking at my stuff. Most of my plays are online. So if I buy a board game, I'll try to dig it out maybe in the first month, 2 months that I have it. And maybe I'll go through it myself, just playing a couple handed here and there. And if I'm lucky, I'll get it to the table with Sarah. And right now, Sarah's it. That's my only group for the most part. So I've been trying to pump the brakes on buying games. I haven't bought that many over the last year or two. I say not that many, probably like 30. Yeah, sadly, I don't get a game played that much. I guess my dad is my other partner, gaming partner that I'll play with here and there. And it was kind of stunning to me. See the results too. I was in the majority of the results here in that 2 to 5 category. So I'm not alone, which is just kind of crazy to me. Surprising results, a fun pull, and a little bit shocking.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to ask the question. I don't know. I was just thinking about going into the New Year's and seeing a lot of lists of people, like, all the games they purchased for the year. And I watch this in this hobby all the time. And you guys know I rail against like Kickstarter and I keep a pretty minimal collection. But the hobby, I get it, right? Like these games are an art form and it's fun to just buy them and collect them and open them up and read the rules. And so I can't complain about that, but it does seem like there's an awful lot of games being purchased without the intent to play, or maybe at least there's an intent to play, but not a realistic likelihood of playing. And maybe that's okay. I love these games too, but I kind of expected it to go about the way that it did.
Yeah, my answer was the same as Adam's, and it was 2 to 5. And like Adam, that was probably an overestimate because so frequently these games I get, I'll play once or maybe even 0 times. But it also depends on the game itself. So if it's one that I really end up enjoying, or even if it's not one that I end up really enjoying, but it's one that I can get to the table with my family, I'm probably going to play it more often just because there's the opportunity. But I guess the real question is, what does that actually mean? Because I think you're also right that there's a lot of people who buy the games because they want to own the game. And a perfect example of that is Barrage. I've got like 30, 40 plays of that now. I'm playing this game constantly, and I own a copy of it, but I never play my physical copy. I played it once or twice, but all the games that I'm playing online. So what does that mean about buying the physical copy? I'm not sure. I like having it, even if I'm not going to be playing it. And in a way, I actually think it's great to support the designers of these games because I'm enjoying the game so much, even if I'm playing it on an online platform.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Chris. And I also have some examples of that. And I'm starting to, I think, lean that direction. I actually answered 6 to 15. And I think that's pretty realistic for me because I keep a pretty small collection. And when I do get games, I get games with the intent of knowing that I can play them, whether it's a solo game or whether it's a game I really feel is going to be hit for, my closest gaming group, which is my wife and our friend Jen. If I don't think a game is going to get played by then, I generally don't play them. But I bought Great Western Trail on sale this year and I got it. I opened it. I played it one time solo and I played it a ton on Board Game Arena. And I really, really like Great Western Trail. But I realized as I'm playing this game, thinking through the teach of it, and I'm like, my local game group, the people I game the most with are not going to enjoy this game. And so I just went to a local seller's market and I sold a whole bunch of games. I sold like 30 games and I almost brought Great Western Trail. Then I realized there's something about the fact that I can just own this game that I really love, even if I don't get it played often. maybe it'll just be in my collection for someday when I build up a new game group, or I introduce someone to new to the hobby and I want to show them this game. Or maybe a couple years down the road, I want to go back to it solo because I haven't played it for a while and I just want to revisit it. So that's kind of my Barrage, Chris. And I would buy Barrage in the same thing. I wouldn't expect to get it played much, but I love the game so much that I might want to just have it in my collection. So I'm starting to build up a little group of games like that are just games that I love that don't get played a lot. And I think this number of 6 to 15 is going to start to drop for me. I think it's already lower than it would have been a year ago. And I'd say I'll probably be in the 2 to 5 range next year. Who knows? I think it's still a noble goal to get the games that you're buying played. Don't just buy stuff to buy stuff. But also, these games are beautiful and they're an art form and they're just really cool and they're exciting to think about the fact that you could go back and play them anytime. So I'm starting to get a little bit less critical of people who just like have, games and aren't getting them played. So
Besides, you got to have something for your shelfie, right?
I don't know. No. Shelfies are nonsense.
Tim, you mentioned something like I'm hoping to get a group together here locally too. And that's the thing, right? How much faith should I put in hope? But I really plan on doing, I'm making friends. People are coming out of the woodwork after COVID. I'm getting a little network here now, which is nice. So I expect that more of these will be getting played if I can develop a little group here. So the last 2-3 years, I don't think is an accurate indication because of the way things were in the world. So hopefully that changes and I move that number up higher for the new games that I purchase.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah, I think like pre-COVID, me, Chris, Adam, you just started to get into the group. I had a regular group that was getting together. I think we would have been getting a lot of these games played a lot if we were all together again. And then COVID changed a lot of things. So it did change my thoughts about what I'm going to get played and my habits. But now I've started to get some groups together. I have my first local like serious gamer group getting together this week. Thursday night. I played a bunch with people around me, but this is at my house. Like I'm hosting a game night and this could turn into a regular thing. And so there's going to be lots of interesting games that I think are going to get played that wouldn't have in the past. So yeah, totally right there with you. The world's changing. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I'm hopeful that at least game playing picks up a little bit more. All right. Well, here's how some people answered on Facebook and on Twitter. If you don't follow us on Twitter, you can find us at BG_hot takes. Or if you're on Facebook, you can search for Board Game Hot Takes, the Facebook group, and would love interacting with all of you and communicating with you out here. And this is where you can respond to these polls. But the first respondent was Brian Chandler over on Facebook. Brian's a good friend of the show, but also he likes to pick on us all the time, and no holds barred here tonight either. He said, I try to play a game 2 times initially so I'm not swayed too much by a single session. Who would form opinions after one play? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark.
Thanks, Brian.
I also find playing twice back to back solidifies the rules in my mind, even if I take a long break. I rarely play any game 10 times in a single year. I prefer variety most of the time. And there's a lot of, reality to this. I mean, I do think you can solidify an opinion about a game after one play. If you don't like it, you don't need to go back to it. But also, I think playing back to back does really help at least solidify the rules and makes the game a smoother experience. And so that can be really fun to go back and do a second play at least. If you enjoy the game at all, you're probably going to have a better play on the second one. I also like variety. I like playing games that I know well, but it's also fun to explore new stuff all the time. So, I think that's another reason why my numbers are going to drop over the coming years. Guillaume Rosale on Facebook said, so it really depends. Retail games got played sometimes dozens of times. On Mars, for instance, got played at least 10 times. Kickstarter games, on the other hand, barely got played once, sometimes twice. Hence my answer 2 to 5. Interesting, isn't it, that Kickstarter games are just lower quality than retail games? I wonder why that is.
That's crazy that you back so many, Tim. I don't know. Get it.
Seriously, Tim back for someone who doesn't back Kickstarter games. You back more Kickstarter games than anybody else I know.
I do have very specific rules and restrictions about the Kickstarter games I back. I don't think those are the types that Guillaume is talking about here, but
okay.
Who knows? Maybe.
The caveats. Gotcha.
Yeah. Right.
Board Game Chatterbox said, I may be fibbing to myself. I picked 6 to 15, but that's because I think overall it averages out. Every campaign or legacy game gets played in full within the year, and every party or card game gets played 5 to 10, but there are lots that get only played once or twice, which I hate. Yeah, if you have a group that you can get through legacy games with, that does help you get some games played a lot more. That's definitely something I'm hoping for. I have this dream in my mind that I'm going to meet the right group of people that love legacy games, and I'm going to get 4 people that just want to do like a weekly or bi-weekly legacy game night, and I can just keep having that happen, even if it's outside of my regular game night. That's one of my life goals. So I'm hoping I get that put together. That'd be so much fun. Marco Stefano Doria said 2 to 5 because in my group we have a lot of games to try and different tastes, so it's difficult to settle on a single title. To reiterate, this weekend I had a chance to play with some local friends. Shout out to Scott who said, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Let's get together." And I said, "Oh yeah, I love to. I can get together on Monday. Here's this one game I just got an expansion for. Would you like to play it?" And instead, he sent me his shelf of shame and said, "These are the games I'd like to play." Everybody wants to get their own games played, right? So
Yeah.
I almost never, if I buy a game I'm excited about, unless I can convince my wife to play with me, everyone else has their own games they want to choose from. So that totally, that makes sense. Makes sense. I used to love my first game group I put together, what Chris was a part of. It was all non-gamers that I kind of started to get into the hobby. So I could just kind of like buy the games and be like, "Hey, this is what we're playing this week." Teach people. And I had full control. It was so much fun. All right, cool. Let's jump into a description of Soul: Last Days of a Star.
In Soul, Last Days of a Star, 1 to 5 players are civilizations that, for generations beyond counting, have been surviving off the energy of their nearby star. Sadly, the party's over, the bills come and due. The trusty energy source is about to go supernova, which leaves these panicking planets with only one option: grab what energy they can before this gravy train leaves the station. And hopefully, just maybe, they can get enough momentum that when the Big Bang comes, they get catapulted into deep space rather than getting roasted like a chicken. Fortunately, players will have a little time to make their final arrangements. Each civilization comes equipped with an ark that will hopefully save their people, a mothership that will circle the sun and provide a base of operations for energy gathering, and a series of worker bee ships called Sundivers. Throughout the game, players will be able to use these Sundivers to build bigger and better gear, like solar bridges, energy nodes, Sundiver foundries, and energy transmission towers. These are the tools each civilization is going to need to create and harness the energy they need to escape certain doom. Each round, players will get a chance to choose one of a few simple actions. They can launch Sundivers and fly them around. They can convert Sundivers into the more advanced equipment by aligning them in various clever patterns, or they can activate the equipment that they've already built. Every action will also trigger the drawing of instability cards. These represent the passage of time and the deterioration of the dying star. As the cards are drawn, the star will become more and more unstable until finally it goes kerplooey. At this point, the civilization with the most momentum, aka victory points, will shoot off into its destiny and be deemed the winner. The rest, sadly, will go out in a blaze of glory. Soul: Last Days of a Star was designed by Ryan and Sean Spangler and is published by Elephant Laboratories.
Thanks for that description, Chris. And before we jump into gameplay and mechanisms, just really quickly, I've had 3 plays of this game. This was Chris's first play. Adam, how many times have you played Soul: Last Days of a Star?
I'd say roughly just under 10, high single digits, if that's a thing.
Cool. I can't seem to say Soul: Last Days of a Star very well. I keep tripping over my own tongue. So I'm just going to say Soul from now on. So I think the most interesting mechanism to me, or the thing that I like the most about this game, is the variability in these cards that come up, these suit cards that you can draw. I've played it 3 times, and every time the kind of special activation abilities you can get from these cards feel very different. So it's fun to play around with those. I always like games like that where every game is going to have a little bit of a unique, like unique powers that you're going to play with. That's a fun thing, especially in a game like this that is so, I don't know, non-variable, right? Like the rest of the gameplay is all very completely lacking in any kind of luck and any kind of variety. And these cards give you something that change, that feel different. And there's quite a variety in there, and they all seem really kind of cool and unique. So I really like those cards. What are those cards called?
That's the instability deck. And it probably makes sense to take a second just to talk a little bit about what it was, because I didn't really get into that in the game description. But the instability deck includes a couple things. It includes the solar flares that actually trigger the end game once they've all been drawn. But there's also these other cards, these suit cards that you were talking about, Tim. And each turn, whenever somebody takes a certain type of action or actions within the interior parts of the star, then they draw a certain number of cards depending on how close they are to the center. In other words, the more activities you're doing at the core of the star, the more instability you're going to create. The farther you go out to the outside of the star, then the less instability there's going to be. But you draw a certain number of cards, and it's going to be one of those two. It's either going to be a suit card or it's going to be a solar flare. And the suit cards are the ones that give you the special abilities that you were just talking about. So, for example, you may have 5 or 6 different suits out. Each one's going to have a different power that's kind of randomly selected. And you draw the card, you get a one-time use special power that you can use for, whatever that power does.
A quick count from the back of the rulebook looks like there's 30 different instability effects. And in a 4-player game, you're going to have the 5 suits of cards. So 5 of these out of the 30. You're going to mix that up. You can do sets if you want. You can do it by random, however you want to do it. You can include your favorite ones. Juggernaut is one of my favorite ones. You can move one of your stations, one of your buildings, like as if it was a sundiver. So kind of position that how you want. Just some fun things that change up the game every time you play it. So I think that instability deck, the instability effects are definitely worth mentioning. One of my favorite parts of this game every time that I've played it. Also want to mention why we're talking about it, probably still in some of Tim's thunder here, but it just wrapped up a Kickstarter with over 2,400 backers. I don't see a late pledge available right now, but what they did last time is they produced a few extra, and they had that you can order from their website direct at Elephant Laboratories, which is what I did back in 2018 or somewhere in there. They had about 100 of these left. I think I bought it strictly based on looks, and it quickly went out of print. And then this game got super popular for whatever reason, and it was hard to come by. And I had heard rumors that there was going to be another Kickstarter coming up. So I sold my copy back then for, I don't know, a decent amount of probably, $50 over what I paid for it, knowing that it was coming back. And it's finally here, and the Kickstarter just wrapped up. But keep an eye on it. I'm sure they'll have extra copies available from their website.
So I also really like those suit cards. But I think one thing that is a little underrated, but still very interesting, is the movement in this game. And it happens in a couple different ways. You have your mothership and you have your sundivers, and both of them are going to move in different manners. The mothership is going to circle the sun, and it's constant. Every turn, you're going to move one click around a clock, so to speak, counterclockwise. And that's going to determine where you can put your sundivers, because you have to take your sundivers out of your mothership. Essentially, they're like drop ships. So you're circling around the sun, and when you get to the right place where you want to drop your sundivers, you do it, and then they can move around. Once the sundivers are out of the mothership, they can go pretty much anywhere with a very significant restriction. There's different levels as you move closer to the interior of the sun, and you can't change levels unless you have a solar bridge. I thought that was really cool, because the closer you get to the center of the sun, the more powerful the actions get, and the more dangerous they get because of the instability deck. But it's not that easy to get there. You have to keep moving across these solar bridges, which means getting the sundivers down there to build those bridges in the first place. And that can end up being really hard to do. So I really thought it was challenging trying to figure out the optimal way to, get yourself into those center rings so that you could do the actions in a powerful way, but at the same time balance that with the need to be able to do things a little easier from time to time to get some energy or build more dropships or whatever, and try to do some actions out in the farther reaches of the outer rings in an area where it's a little bit easier to do as well.
Yeah, and what Chris didn't mention is that when you build one of these, it's not only that you can use it, but everybody can use it. And when they use it, you get some benefit for it. And it can be a significant benefit the closer you build it to the middle of the sun. And that's where there is a very high amount of player interaction here. There's a lot of interactivity between what you're doing, what other people want to do. You build a bridge. Is it a desirable bridge? People are going to use it. You're going to get energy for it. You build a power beacon or whatever, close to the outer ring. Nobody wants to use that. They're not going to get much for it. But if you build it into the middle, which is going to take you a while to get there and build up your cost, other people are going to use it. You're going to get some just like passive income, passive stuff that's going to happen for you. And, that's pretty cool. That's cool for people that like a lot of player interaction and want to play with other people and not themselves. So, yeah, it'd be good for you.
Well, and it's great for me because that's exactly what I'm looking for in a game. So I love the interaction here. The deck is aligned so that you can have only, they call it positive interactions. The red cards, the red suit here of the instability effects is kind of the negative player interaction, where you can kind of do a little take that on the other players in the game. But if you can exclude those, the designers specifically made this red deck easily excludable so that all the interactions are relatively positive. But I love that you're looking at other people's energy, which is kind of the currency in the game, these red cubes. Oh, if I activate Chris's transmission tower here, he only has 2 energy cubes. I can get all 8 energy if I have 8 energy cubes. So you're trying to set yourself up in a good position to use other people's stuff. Maybe you're desperate and you're only going to take just the base value and you're going to give them the bonus. But if you do it right, then you can suck up that the base value and the bonus value on somebody else's equipment. Which, how cool is that? So I like the aspect of positioning and timing and keeping an eye on other players' sort of currency and energy and making the right moves when the opportunity presents itself.
And I do want to speak back to that because I kind of sarcastically said that, if you like this is actually really good player interaction, I think. It's player interaction where you're building something, you can get extra benefits from other people if they choose to use it. They don't have to. I think the player interaction here is actually really interesting, and there's really nothing negative about that. You mentioned the, kind of the red cards that can come up that could be negative, but they're not drastically mean generally, and you don't have to play with them. So I think generally you can find the level of player interaction you want here. You're going to have some, but it's never like someone's not messing with your plans for the most part. It's just you might be giving them some opportunities.
I got a good one, Chris. What do you think about the movement aspect and having the puzzle of putting your sun divers in the right place to build the different equipment?
I thought that was pretty cool. Basically, what Adam's talking about is in order to build equipment, you have to take these sun divers, which are really the foundation for everything, and put them in these little formations. So if you put 3 of them in a row toward the center of the sun, for example, you can build a transmission tower. That's kind of like the highest level of equipment. Or if you put them in other little formations, like side by side next to each other, or side by side but one space apart from each other, then you can build these other types of equipment. It was cool, and I liked the idea. I found it a little frustrating here because getting those sun divers out and trying to get them into position using the limited moves that you have and making sure that you've got enough sun divers to actually do the things that you need to do, that was a constant struggle in this game. You're always trying to make sure that you've got enough sun divers out there that you can do whatever it is you're trying to get done. But that's hard to do because then you have to have foundries, and then you have to use moves to get your sun divers over to the foundry, to activate the foundry, then activate it, and then get those ships back onto your mothership, and then get them out and get them doing whatever they're doing. So it's like, it felt like a lot of work getting these things done. And honestly, really trying to get some of those things accomplished was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Probably would get a lot easier once after a couple plays, but this play was a little frustrating.
No, I think I've had a hard time articulating what has been a challenge for me with this game or what I didn't like about it. And I think that's exactly what it is that it just feels like so much work to get anything done. And then you get, you produce something and you convert your sun divers into these buildings and then they're gone. And then you have to go through the cycle of having to recreate them again. And it's also frustrating that you can build a sundiver foundry and then you create sundivers, but they don't get built at the foundry. So it doesn't matter how, you want to build them closer into the infrastructure that you're trying to get to, but instead they start all the way on the outer ring again. So then you have to spend turns moving them back. And of course your movement gets better. So it gets a little bit easier over the course of the game, or at least it does for other players that were doing better than I was. It feels redundant and it feels a little bit just grindy to me to do that stuff.
I agree with you guys to an extent. For me, the first few games felt a little handcuffy for sure. And I was like, this game I can't even do anything. But then, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth game, it started to open up for me so much more. I saw the different little options and how to more efficiently do this. And, well, I can put 2 guys here and those guys will change into this. And I already have a sundiver right where I need it to be. And boom, I can activate that next turn. And now I've got all this energy and a couple more sundivers. I can build more stuff. So that's something that for me, I totally agree. First few plays, it was frustrating, but then it started to open up third, fourth play, and something just clicked, and the game started to open right up for me. So I enjoyed that. I like that spatial puzzle. For me, it's a unique little puzzle that not that many other games do anything similar. So I like it. I like that exercise of having to go through how am I going to line my sundivers? Am I going to move them efficiently? Oh, nope. Now I got to move back 3 spaces this way. I should have just dropped it. Why didn't I do this last? I had a lot of those moments in my first few games, and that's something that's been smoothed out as I play this game more and more.
Adam, I think you're right. This is pretty unique. I can't think of any other games that do anything quite like this. I'm sure there probably are, but I'm not sure who. I mean, I don't know what they are.
Tiny towns.
Oh, well, there you go. Tiny towns.
All right.
There's one.
That's the only other one I can think of where kind of the spatial location of where you place things on the board, then it creates things based on those spatial relationships. But it's a very different game. So let's talk about the theme and production of Soul. This theme, there's something weird about the game where I always want to call it an abstract game, but honestly, the game is very thematic. I mean, like everything you're doing kind of represents parts to the story. And I think the story is pretty interesting. Chris told a little bit about it in the game description, and I think that's fascinating. And the production here, very cool. I mean, it's a very unique production, great, unique little components and minis for all the different factions that are out there. So I can't complain at all about the theme or production of this game. In fact, I think it's quite fascinating.
I think this game is absolutely beautiful. In fact, I think I bought it primarily on looks when I was first getting into the hobby back in, like I said, 2018 or whatever it was. It was just striking to me. The board is this bright, dying sun with the vastness and blackness of space right behind it. And you're orbiting it, and you have these towers that just stand up on this board, and it does feel, the pieces do feel, I don't want to say chess like. So I can see why some people might think it's kind of abstract, but I can't say it's abstract at all for me. There's tons of theme here. There's a whole book of lore that comes with the book that talks about the story of these different planets and the civilizations on these planets and what they're all about and how they're trying to escape and why they should be the ones to make it off. It's absolutely fascinating. Production is beautiful. The pieces are amazing. The miniatures are fantastic. There's a different mothership for each of the different societies. All the other pieces are the same after that. I think the little momentum tracker is cool, along with the flare tracker. I think it's a fantastic production and theme from top to bottom.
I am at a loss on what to say about the production and theme for this game because, on the one hand, the production of Soul is, dare I say, glorious. I mean, I could not look away from this board. We were sitting there playing this game on Tabletop Simulator, and I just sat there the whole time going, oh my God, this thing looks so good. The picture, like Adam said, the sun is striking. These ships circling the sun, orbiting around it, it just has this feeling. It's almost haunting. In fact, I kept flashing back through this whole game to this really kind of creepy sci-fi horror movie called Sunshine, which, for those who haven't seen it, go see it. It's awesome, worth watching. Doesn't really have anything to do with this, but it kind of had that feel to me, sort of like this end of the world, catastrophic, apocalyptic, all these things happening around this really impressive central sun. But for all of that beauty, this game does not have a lot of personality. At least I'm interpreting where Tim's getting the abstractness from. Like, I think of a game like Eclipse. There's a lot of ships, but there's a lot more individualism. Like, you actually have a picture on your player board of what your people look like. And there's a little story about, they're robot people or they're lizard people, whatever, that sort of thing. It's not much, but at least it feels like it gives you a little bit more connection. In this game, I felt like it was beautiful, but I didn't connect with it in that story sense, even though the mechanisms were so heavily thematic. It's really, I feel whipsawed on this one because I have so many conflicting emotions about it that, I don't even know what to say.
Adam, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can see where you're absolutely coming from, Chris. But again, the whole aspect of this dying star, and as these flares are coming out, you got that deck that's like a countdown timer. Oh man, Chris just got 2 flares, and there's only 3 flares left in the deck. Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? I only have maybe one more turn to get the most momentum to get out of here. So to me, it's really this. It just works for me. It fits this whole struggle of trying to gather all this energy, hurling your sun divers into the core of the sun, because you don't need them anymore. You just need to harness that energy and escape the sun before it goes supernova. To me, this game is oozing with theme every time I play it. I have this kind of haunting sensation when I'm playing this game, and then I think the board and the pieces and the trackers and the way the flares come out all just add to that and it works for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all on that, Adam. I mean, it is the way that this game operates, the thematic integration with the mechanisms is so good. I totally get what you're saying. I don't disagree.
And I get what you're saying too, that the pieces are all, they're very like chess like, and you're taking this move, and it's a very, yeah, it does have that. I don't know, in some ways this game almost feels like a Zool to me, because you're just thinking about, oh, what can I do here, what can I do here? So I can see on one hand it does have that very just straightforward approach, and it is very mechanical. You're just going around here, you can drop some sundowers out. But again, the way it develops, and by the end of the game, you have all these different options and those different cards, the instability effects make some wacky things that can happen. So I see what you're saying, and but there's so much about it that works for me. I just keep saying the same thing over and over, right?
All right, well, let's jump into the final question is, would you request to play this again? I mean, I hate to start here because I don't like to start negative, but the reality is that I don't enjoy this game very much. I went back, we played this game about 3 years ago a couple times, and I went back and looked at the rating that I gave it on Board Game Geek at the time, and I gave it a 5 out of 10. And I rarely give a game that low. I'm pretty optimistic, but I remember just not having very much fun with it. Being one of the only games where while the game was playing, I didn't sit there and really focus on what other people were doing or think about the board. I wanted to be doing something else. Now, I had a better experience tonight. I think the game is actually really good. If this is a type of game for you, I think it's probably going to be spectacular. But for some reason, I just get bored playing this game. It's not fun for me. I think maybe it's like chess, right? Like chess is a beautiful game. I can sit down and I like the idea of playing a game of chess, but I will never ask to play chess over many of the other types of board games we play. And maybe this is the same reason. I don't know why this just keeps bringing me back to chess, because it's just moving pieces around the board and taking these actions that just, I don't know. There's just something that feels very redundant about what you're doing here. I can't articulate it because I look at this game, I read the rules again tonight, and I said, everything about this seems like it should be a fun game. And I was playing it, and I was seeing like, wow, that's a really cool mechanism. That's really neat how you do that. But I still wasn't having very much fun playing it. Maybe it doesn't help that every time I played this game, the 3 times I played it, I made some bad decisions early and I was running behind, and there's really no catch. Not that you need a catch up mechanism in every game, but this game, once you're behind, you're never going to come back to the front, right? Like, maybe that's part of it. And maybe if I just made some better decisions early game, and had a better, felt like I was doing something. Like Adam talked about the tension of, flipping over that deck and whether or not the solar flare happens. Well, there was no tension for me at all, even at the end of the game, because it didn't matter when a solar flare happened. There was no way that it was going to matter how many points I was going to catch up or whether I could be in competition here. So I don't know. I think it's a combination of those things, just kind of the abstract, unvariable feeling of the types of gameplay you're doing, but also the lack of tension, at least in the position that I was in the game, that every time I played it, it's kind of felt the same way. And it's not a game that I would ever ask to go back to.
This is interesting, Tim. I feel like this is one of the games that we diverge on the most, and it's interesting to hear you try to articulate why, and see you struggle a little bit with why it doesn't exactly work for you. And I want to dig down and figure out exactly what about it is, because I can tell when you're playing, you're just like, it's not working for you. So I would absolutely request to play this one again if you haven't figured it out by now. And that's why I backed it, and I have it coming whenever it gets here. This is one that every time I played, those first 3-4 times I played it, I was kind of ho-hum on it. But then every time after that, playing it, I played it at 2, and it wasn't anything special at 2. But the higher player counts, 4 and 5 players, I think is where it excels. And that's, I hope I have a game group by the time it gets here, because otherwise me and Sarah and I are probably going to be playing something else instead of this one. But again, going back to that poll question. This is one I'm going to be happy to own and have in my collection. I'm going to look at it, even if I don't play it. I'm going to say, this game makes me feel good. It's beautiful. It's unique. It's a relatively light rules overhead. The setup takes a little bit. Every time I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do here with these decks and mix them up? But it's pretty simple when you get down to it. So after a few times of setting it up and getting it going, you'll be orbiting the stars and messing up with your sun divers in no time.
So, Adam, if you're looking to drill down on this, then you're going to have to put Tim and I on the psychiatrist couch here, because I agree with everything he said. So, rather than repeat everything that Tim already said, because he kind of said it just as well as I could have, just to summarize, I loved looking at this game. I can see the elegance of the mechanisms in this game. I didn't have any complaints about the rules. I thought it was relatively streamlined. I can see the cleverness of the integration of the theme and the mechanisms, and there's so many things about this that I admire. I really like about it. But when it actually comes down to sitting and playing this game, between the relative dryness of the story and felt like sort of blah grindiness of some of the moving around and trying to get things done, I just didn't have that much fun with it. So my answer is I wouldn't ask to play this one again, and which is not to say that if I played it a couple more times I wouldn't enjoy it more. But like we always say, if there's a game that you don't love, why are you going to come back to it when there's so many good games out there? So hey, if you want to bring it, Adam, and play it at a con or something like that, I'd be happy to sit down and play it with you again. Well, I mean, Tim's shaking his head, and I guess happy may be overstating that, but I'd be willing to sit down and play with you again. But it's not something that I go looking for.
And I didn't see Steve having any unbridled joy towards this one either. He said, yeah, we played it and I kicked your guys' butts again. But it wasn't, he was like, eager to go and get after it like he was with a few of these other games we've been playing.
All right. Well, an interesting one. And I liked it more in my third play than I did on my first and second. And I wonder if it wouldn't be more interesting or more fun after you got to know it and you got with a group of people that just, that loved playing it. Maybe I would enjoy it more after several more plays with the right group, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of other games I really go to. All right. Well, that'll wrap up the conversation on Soul Last Days of a Star. Let's jump into some games that have been on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. So I'm going to talk about a couple games that were sent to me by publishers as review copies, and these are kind of relevant. They're similar, and so I wanted to talk about them both at the same time. The first of the two, this is called Battlecrest Fellwoods by designer Dustin Dobsons and Milan Zivkovic, and this was published by Buttonshy Games. And why this game is so interesting is that this is a tactical skirmish game made out of only 18 cards. And so when Buttonshy reached out to me and asked if we would like to review this game, I thought this has got to be interesting. I've got to check this game out. And so they sent me a copy of it. Battlecrest comes in a little tiny pocket like all of the Buttonshy games do. And it comes with enough of a game to play two players. The base game does. So it'd be a 2-player skirmish game. The way this game works, it's all cards. It's 18 cards. And you have a play area that is a 6x6 grid, but there's only 6 cards laid out in that play area. There's a specific alignment. Those cards are kind of the lands that you're interacting with in this game. And then each of your 2 players, if you're playing 2 players, starts on opposite corners of this map. So they're kind of on the outside of this 6x6 grid. And so these characters are, a little normal playing card size card, but they're going to be moving around this 6x6 grid. The way that you interact with the lands in this grid is that if you are adjacent to a land, some of the lands have little shortcuts through them. So you can never cross over a land, but if there's a shortcut arrow on the side that you're on, you can exit out of that land on another side. So sometimes you're going to have opportunities to move through these lands, but also if you end your movement on one of these lands, you can sometimes trigger an ability on that land. And they do a variety of things. It might give you a ranged attack that you can do from that location, or you can get a star, which triggers your own personal ability on your card. Otherwise, basically what you're doing is you're moving around the board, and each player has like 3 action cards, and then your life indicator is also represented by a card. And this is kind of clever because you have 3 or 4 action cards, and then your life indicator sits up above those. And as you lose life, you just move it over. So you don't even have tokens or trackers or anything like that. Use this one card, and based on where it is above your your action cards, it tells you how much life you have. You flip it over at some point and you get lower life. So the point of the game, of course, in a tactical skirmish game is to do enough damage to knock out your opponent. And that's no different here. There's a couple really clever things that are going on here. These action cards are multi-purpose. If they're face up, kind of untapped at the start of your turn, and you move, then you can use these action cards to do whatever they do, whether it's like you can tap one and it will do damage or whatever. But if you leave them untapped, they generally have shield icons at the bottom so that you can get extra block if somebody attacks you. But also when you tap them, then it puts these little symbols, and each of them has some different colored symbols on them. And those symbols might make other abilities activate. But the other cool thing is that whenever you activate one, you flip it over, and now it's got different abilities and different shield icons and different icons. So it's a pretty clever little system of like giving you a variety of different actions that you can use every turn. And then each of the characters, it comes with 2 characters. The starting deck comes with a Kena Fatebringer, who is kind of a melee fighter. She wants to get up close and beat up her opponent closely. And the other character is Mutiny Target Locked, which is a character with a gun. And he is, trying to shoot with ranged attacks. You can't use those up close. So he's always trying to get a little bit further away and fire on the opponent. And then the other one is trying to get up close to you and attack. It's a really clever system. I really like the way that the action, these action cards work and how they change what you can do and how you can try to set yourself up by activating some of these little icons to make some of the actions more powerful. So that's really cool. Now, they also sent me an expansion for this game, expansion collection number 1. The concern I had with any type of tactical skirmish game is that you're basically generally trying to move in, attack an opponent, but do it outside of range of what they can attack you, etc. And it can be a little bit boring, a little bit grindy. And when I played with the first 2 characters in this deck, that's kind of what the game was. Even though the mechanisms are really clever in the way that you interact with the lands and the way you interact with your action cards are really clever, I felt like the game was constantly just like, okay, I'm going to move close enough, do just enough damage, but leave enough shields back so that you can't do a lot of damage to me. And the other person's doing the same thing. It was this back and forth that just kept going on. And that's always how these tactical skirmish games feel to me. Funko Pop game felt like that to me. Like almost, Marvel HeroClix felt like that to me back in the day. These games always just kind of have that back and forth with them that just gets a little bit old pretty quickly for me. And that's how it felt. So I was really hopeful that the expansion would give some character abilities that would really change that up, change the way that things interacted. And so the expansion comes with these other 2 characters, Forge Steampunked, which is this big, huge metallic creature with a huge shield. And then this little winged cat looking creature that's really cool called Whisper Silent Wings. And so they do have some slightly different abilities. Whisper allows you to, change movement. She's got this fly ability. Forge Steampunk lets you kind of push people and make them like move to other areas. So it does change up the abilities a little bit, but unfortunately not drastically enough to really take away that feeling of a tactical skirmish game where you're just doing that back and forth. Now, I do think once you add us an expansion, you can actually play 4 players on this. And that's where I think this game is the most interesting, because then you do have a lot more different interactions going on. It's not just one person going out there pushing back against another person, back and forth, etc. So, I think that at 4 players, this could be a pretty interesting game, but you do have to buy at least 1 expansion. They also have a bunch of little mini character packs it looks like you can buy. So there's a bunch of characters here. One of the reasons why I wanted to look at this game, aside from just trying out an 18-card tactical skirmish game, was that the artwork on these are just really, really cool. It's like kind of 90s comic book style artwork. The characters are all very unique characters. Like the Sakana character has 4 arms with like an old gladiator like helmet on. The Mutiny Target Locked is this bearded dude with like all steampunk tech on him. So but just really cool art style. And I think for what Button Shy does, I think this is one of the most interesting productions that they've done. And I think they did a really cool job for a little pocket size tactical skirmish game. So I think this is a really cool game. Tactical skirmish generally doesn't work well for me. And this one didn't really change my mind on it. I don't think it's a game that I'm going to want to be going back to, but if you like tactical skirmish games, you can throw this in your pocket, and it's got a very cool system.
Yeah, I haven't found the joy in tactical skirmish games either, Tim. So if there's listeners out there that have anything to suggest, I'd like to hear about it, because I want to know what makes this fun for you. Did this give you like a Radlands feel at all? Because the back and forth was kind of the feeling I get from like a Radlands or even like a Dice Throne. We played that here when he came by real quick, Tim, for a quick stop. Do you get any similar feelings to those games?
No, and I'll tell you why. And so Radlands and Dice Thrones to a small effect feel more like a classic card battler like Magic the Gathering to me, which is a back and forth. But I think the thing about the tactical skirmish games that always bug me a little bit is that it's like you're relying on movement, and the movement means you want to be a certain amount away from somebody or close to somebody, and it's always just like, oh, there's not enough that you can do to make it feel interesting. You're always just trying to get right to the right space, and not too close, not too far away. I don't know, something about that doesn't work. But like Radlands never felt like that, right? It's more of just like this cool, like, hey, I got these two cards in my hand, what am I going to do with one of them? It's a little bit more Euro style. You're making decisions about the resources you've got, and timing and things like that. So this doesn't feel like that to me. This felt more like, in a lot of ways, I would say, but probably just a little bit more unique, like the Funko Pop game, where you're moving around, you're trying to get to a certain position. Or again, I mentioned Hero Clicks. I haven't played a lot of miniatures games, but like I played BattleTech a little bit with some people years ago, and that felt the same. Like, okay, I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to move to this one space on the map because I'm just out of bombardment range of your characters, but I'm hoping that then you'll move next turn so that I can move around and get close to you. I don't know, the movement rules, they just feel not fun. The effect of moving around and doing that is not fun.
So, Tim, I'm going to ignore the skirmish game aspect of this and ask you about this little small 18 card deck game aspect of it. I have another game by Button Shy. It's called Unsurmountable, and it's the same kind of deal. Little pocket. It comes with like, I don't know, a dozen cards or so. I feel almost like games like that are a bit of a it's almost like those games are a bit of a gimmick. That are you really going to get enough game out of those 18 cards in order to make it worth sticking that in your pocket? I mean, because if I want, I mean, I can't fit it in my pocket, but if I want to play a good solid game, I can carry a pack of the base deck of Star Realms around with me or something similar to that, and I'm going to get a lot more game out of that, I feel like. So I mean, what did you think? Did it have enough game in there to make it worthwhile?
Yeah, I think it did. I think this was a great competition for something like the Funko Pop board game, and I think the variety in the characters is just about as unique. I thought the mechanisms, although not the same, had the same kind of interesting opportunities and options there. So I think if you want a tactical skirmish game, this is a great game, and obviously it has the benefit of being able to fit in your pocket. But I don't think it's any worse than most of the full board game box size tactical skirmish games, at least the few that I've been introduced to. But I'm going to give you an example of one where I think it did actually exceed those expectations a little bit. And that's the second game I'm going to talk about today. And that is also a publisher reached out to us. This is by the Op Games, reached out to us. They wanted us to take a look at Disney Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances. So this one kind of took me off guard because when they reached out to me, I immediately said, no, I'm sorry, we're not really interested. But then I took a look at it and I was like, this might be something. I've been having a hard time getting my daughter excited about board games, but she loves Disney characters. And this game basically makes a tactical skirmish game out of a large variety of Disney and Pixar characters. So the base game box has Aladdin, it has Maleficent, it has Sully from Monsters Inc., it has Little Mermaid. It just has this great variety of Disney and Pixar characters in the base box. And I was like, well, she loves all these characters. Maybe she'll want to try this with me. So the way this game works is it is also a tactical skirmish game. Now it has a really interesting teaching mode on it, which I think is probably really smart for them if you're introducing it to children, to, kind of non-gamers. The way it starts is that basically you open the first pages and it says like put two characters on each side of the board, don't play with these components, and you've got these two, and it tells you which characters to play with, and it kind of removes a lot of the rules that are in there, makes it really simple to play. The problem for me and even for my daughter was that we played with those starting rules and it was pretty dull. It kind of had some of the same issues that I mentioned about tactical skirmish games where the only characters were kind of like fight characters. So you basically were just like moving around, trying to get close to somebody, punch them, then you're close to them, so they're going to punch you after that. And that was a little dull. So after that first game, I went back and I played it several times just with the full rule set. You're supposed to play through like 4 different sets of rules. You kind of add a little bit as you go. But I went back, and as a gamer, I went back and played with the full rule set. And this game actually got really interesting. And the reason that it got interesting was not just because of the extra rules, because there were some interesting things that are happening here. Basically, it's this kind of this big grid board, which I think is the least interesting part of the production, because it just looks like a whole bunch of hexagons with no artwork on it or anything like that. It looks like a big bunch of stone hexagons. But your characters start on opposite ends of the board. And one of the things that's kind of cool about it is that there are 3 spaces kind of in the middle of the board that if you start your turn on them, you get a victory point. And the game ends when somebody gets to, I think it's 20 victory points. And so you kind of have a motivation to get out to the middle of the board, even if you're not fighting with somebody, and just hold that spot, kind of a king of the hill type of thing. That was a fairly clever mechanism. But the other thing that got really interesting once we added the full rule set is you played with more of the characters. You can set it up as a draft. So you kind of draft your characters at the beginning of the game. And after you pick every character, every player would have 3 characters on each side, and it can be good guys and bad guys. You're just mixing all these characters in here together. But then you set up this line of their tokens down the side of the board, and it shows what player order they're going in. So each of the tokens represents each of the characters, and you go, one team, then the other team, then the next team, etc. You're going back and forth. But there's a whole bunch of status effects that you can get on these characters, and they represented by these little cardboard tokens. And so when your character gets a status effect, you just put it next to your token on the side of the board. And there's a whole lot of interesting effects that happens here. And I think this is where it got really interesting. And some of the characters are not even like skirmish characters at all. Like they're doing really cool things. Like I forget what the character from the he's the bad guy in The Princess and the Frog. I don't remember what his name is right now.
Oh, Doctor.
That guy. Yeah, Doctor, whatever that guy is. Right. So he's a super weak character, but all he does is like all of his abilities kind of makes status effects. Like you can turn somebody into a frog where they like get smaller and they get shrunk in, or you can do all these cool effects with them. And so all of a sudden you've got these characters. Now, here's what's really cool about the mechanism of this. And what I really like about it though, aside from just that it doesn't feel like a typical skirmish game, when you pick your 3 characters at the start of the game, this is a card driven game. And so your actions are dictated by when it's your character's turn, you're going to play an action. You get 2 actions. You can do a move and you can do an attack, or an action, they call it, but most of them are attacks. And so you have a hand of, I think it's 5 or 6 cards. And basically what happens, you shuffle 3 decks together. You shuffle the 3 characters' decks together and you draw that hand of 5 cards. And so on your turn, when it's let's say it's Sully's turn, right? You have to play cards from Sully's movement and actions. But if you don't have any in your hand, or if they're not the right ones, you've got some basic movement and actions. You can do a basic move of 2 and a basic attack of 2. So there's always something you can do. But the cards give a lot of variety in what's going to happen. You never know what your opponent can do. So you might say, hey, I'm not going to quite get in range of them, but all of a sudden they've got an action card that lets them do an attack from 4 spaces away that you weren't expecting. So all of a sudden there's a variety, and you never know where's the right spot to be. You just need to go in there, do the best actions you can, set yourself up, take advantage of those spaces on the board that are kind of king of the hill spaces. So yeah, this game didn't feel like most tactical skirmish games to me. I had a lot of fun playing this. And this is one of the few ones where I think it's worth going back to. It's a very quick game too. You play to like, I forget what it is. It's 15 or 20 points, but it played in like 20 minutes, even with the full game in there. And there's an opportunity to upgrade your character based on what cards get discarded into your discard pile. So you're kind of making all these really fun and interesting choices throughout the game. All kinds of different abilities. Mickey is one of the characters you can play in this one. The Mickey from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? So it's Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey. And his ability, he's got this magic broom that gets stronger as you get more magic spells in your deck. So if you mix other characters that have magic spells in their deck, then all of a sudden he can be better. So the way you combine these get really interesting. Beyond that, they sent us 2 of the expansions. There's only 2 expansions available right now, but those expansions drastically changed what types of characters. Each of them came with 3 different characters, and it was a variety. There was like the bad guy from the Black Cauldron.
That's old school. Yeah, it's going way back.
Yeah, he has these little zombie tokens you can put about around the board, and it was like the bad guy from Pirates of the Caribbean, the squid face dude, Davy Jones. You could play Davy Jones in that game. So all kinds of unique characters, all kinds of unique abilities. This game was really fun. I think it's great. Now, it's not a super complicated game or anything like that. I'm not saying that this is the right game for your average gamer, but I think if you're a family weight gamer, or if you're somebody that just loves Disney, like Chris, your family likes Disney, right? You guys are Disney fans.
Yep.
I mean, if you like Disney, there's just so much fun to be had with the characters and the types of cards you can get in these decks and the actions you're doing. I think this is a really great game. I was, to be honest, very surprised by how much I like the game.
So Tim, I'm looking at the production here. It looks like there's these acrylic standees. One side has the front, one side has the back of the character. I think that's a nice touch. And do they twist on their standees? Does that track something?
Okay, so you just brought up one of the great things about the production and one of the negative things about the production. So the great thing is that these acrylic standees are really cool. It's beautiful artwork, and they've given unique representations that fits really well together. So all these characters from different Disney and Pixar properties, but they've been drawn in a way that they all match in. So they're not all like the traditional old school style. They all have like an artwork that fits together here. And these acrylic standees are really cool. Here's the negative. So there's a little tracker. Each of them has a unique base that you stand them in, and they all have a different life points depending on who the character is. Like Sully's stronger than the Little Mermaid, for example. He has more hit points on him. So each of the bases is unique to them. And so you got to dig through this pile and find the right base to put the standee in. But then there's a little base you put on it for your player color. So you would pick 3 red bases, and I think it's 3 blue bases, and you put them on the right characters. And then to adjust the life whenever you take damage, it looks like it should just kind of slide down or click around, but it doesn't. You have to kind of pull the ring off the base and then move it and put it back down. So it gets very fiddly, and you can't even do that while it's on the board. You have to pick it up from the space, adjust it, and then be like, wait, where did I just pick this up from? It looks really cool. The production seems really cool, but those bases were a pain in the butt to work with. The life trackers were a pain in the butt to work with. The other little criticism I had was I mentioned there's a lot of status effects you can get on your characters, but the status effects are just a word, and they don't tell you what they do out on the board. So there's a reference on the back of the rule book that has like 10 different status effects you have to go and look up. And then the expansions also do the same thing. So it's made to mix all these characters in, but then you're referencing the rule book all the time. That stuff's going to be familiar after a few plays, but some of them were kind of complicated. They weren't like super simple status effects. So there were a couple, flaws that made it a little less playable than it should have been for a really family weight game. But but they weren't too bad. They weren't something I would say would turn me off of the game.
Yeah, that thing about the bases is a bummer because it looks like that would have been a good opportunity for them to have a real success, and instead it ended up being a bit of a failure.
All right, cool. Well, anyway, those were 2 tactical skirmish games that very interesting. Both I think pretty unique and offered some things that were a little bit different than I was expecting.
So Tim, does mean you're going to have a Warhammer 40K complete set of terrain and characters and painted armies? But yeah. Well, the game I've had on my table, I got this one for Christmas, and I think it's a fantastic gift. This is Tsuro. This is published way back in the olden times of 2005. Designer is Tom McMurtry and published by, I think it's Calliope Games is the version I have. It's a beautiful production. I don't know how to describe this game. This one is a true abstract. You start with a different colored dragon token, however many players are playing. I think it plays up to 8 or something. Everybody puts a dragon token on the edge of the board, and that's not significant that it's a dragon at all. But from there, you go around the table, putting one of 3 tiles from your hand onto the board. And these tiles, they have 2 little trails that begin on each edge, right? So that's 2, 4, 6, 8 trails total. I guess it's only 4 trails. So anyway, they go from one of these little dits to another side. So it might just be a U-turn from the top side of the square to the bottom side of the square, or it might go all the way across the square, just straight across, or it might loop to the left, an outer loop, an inner loop to the left, or it might zigzag across to the other side. Anyway, you're making a little path for your dragon, and he's going to the interior of the board, and you want to keep your dragon on the interior board as long as possible. You want to outlast everybody else playing this game. You play a tile and you draw another tile, so you have 3 tiles in your hand. Everybody does that until the tiles are out. When this game gets a little more interesting is when you have dragons that are kind of close to each other. You might have a tile that you're putting for your dragon. He might just go straight across. Well, that'll connect to a dragon on your left. And maybe that tile that brings your dragon straight across to the safe zone, keeping him on the board, connects to a path to this dragon on the left that the dragon will be forced to take, and takes him off to the edge of the board, and boop, you've just zapped that guy off the planet, and he's done. That person's out of the game. So that's it. That's this game. There's tiles that go around. You try to keep your dragon alive as long as possible. And that's it. I had a fun time with this one. I'm hoping to get my daughters into this one. They're 7 years old. The game says that you can play it starting at 8 years old. We'll see if they can handle it. I bet they can. That's Tsuro. Tsuro. And both of you guys have played this one, correct? I heard you talking about it earlier tonight.
Yeah, it's such a fun game. I've had a copy of this since well before I was a hobby gamer, and it's just so much fun because it's the simplest possible rule set you could ever have. It's just put down a tile and then follow the path that you lay down. I taught it to my son, and he immediately fell in love with it and was like playing it with his friends. So really, really fun game, easily accessible, unless you buy the $500 super duper.
Okay, this is the one.
Yeah, this is the one that Tim brought up a long time ago. It was like the ultra, like hand carved box, and it's like, monks write out the instruction manual on, calligraphy on parchment, and it was crazy. But a super fun game.
Yeah, I've only played it a few times, but I've enjoyed it. It is very simple and kind of silly. Like there's it's a lot of luck, but it's a fun game. I would play this anytime. The one time I played this with Chris at one of his friends' house, and they had a copy of Tsuro. I think it was Phoenix Rising was the version.
Yeah, there's a few variations on it, right?
But this one had an interesting mechanism where there were these like Phoenix tiles that would move around the board. So instead of just being able to be knocked off the board, if your character got on a track that ran you off the board, which is how you would get knocked out, this one also had these phoenixes that were moving around, and then they could potentially, if you ran into one of them or if they ran into you, then you would just get knocked out. So it just added an extra element of like randomness. I think if I remember, you rolled 2 dice, and one of the dice represented which color Phoenix moved, and the other one represented which which direction it moved or something like that. Or I think, or was it Tsuro of the Seas? I don't remember. There's one of these variants. Maybe it's Tsuro of the Seas.
It was Tsuro of the Seas that we played.
Okay, that's the one. It's dragons that are moving around, not the Phoenix one. So it's like dragons that are moving around the board and can eat you. So it just added a little element. But I remember having a good time, like sitting there playing through it to the end and be like, oh, if I can move this thing, maybe he'll fall off there. Yeah, it's a fun game.
Now, Chris, I played it 3 times there with Sarah and my dad, and we just went around and played it 3 times. Lost every time. How much agency do you feel like you have in this game? Is it just kind of mostly luck with maybe a tad bit of agency every once in a while? Or that's the kind of sense I got. Is that accurate?
It's somewhere in the middle. I mean, it's definitely more agency than, say, Sorry or Monopoly, because you actually can try to do clever things with the pathways, but on the other hand, you're kind of tied to whatever tile you pull up and whichever way the pathways go. Now you have 4 different options every time one of those comes up, and you can plan well and do well, or you can not plan well and you end up going off the board. But like you said, it's not like it's not a deep strategy game.
Well, I will say that out of the 3 games we played, my dad won all 3 times. So maybe there's something going on there.
Nice.
Don't give him any credit for that. All right. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you enjoy the show, you can follow us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes, and we'd love it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts. Until next week, take care, everyone.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.